Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Jon Rivers from Marketeery. Jon, welcome.
Thanks for having me on your podcast.
I'm looking forward to also meeting you in Tampa in our event. So we have much to talk about, but it would be great if you would take a minute or two. Please introduce yourself and your agency.
Yeah, and before I jump in there, I'm looking forward to the in-person event as well. It's going to come up very soon, right? So a little bit about myself and our marketing agency. Our marketing agency, as you said, is called Marketeery. It actually started we're about going into our fifth year. We're very, very focused in on the ERP and CRM space when it comes to Microsoft, primarily in the SMB space. We help partners, ISVs, system integrators, really with their whole marketing, basically everything from strategy to baseline messaging to setting up websites to actually content, demand gen, all of those things. What probably makes us a little different is that we come from a different background than probably a lot of marketing folks do. My personal background is that I actually trained as a developer. And don't laugh about that. It's like, how did he get to marketing? Because that definitely could be a conversation we get into. But yeah, so a number of our team actually started in that place. So we've got experience from developing to pre-sales to consultancy to running a channel for various different ISVs, sales, selling ERP, and so on. So that really, for us, is a big differentiator that's really helping us grow our business out there.
That's pretty terrific. In fact, when you think about, process automation, I mean, there's a lot of hoopla about agentic platform and everything else right now. But when we dial back maybe a decade or two ago, the entire business process automation industry was like jumping up and down about SaaS coming in and transforming not just enterprise, but mid-market and SMB, right? So,
Right.
so tell me a little bit about, if you kind of dial back where things were a decade or two ago when it came to business process automation.
Back then, I think if you go back there, everything just moves so quick. It's like when is that 10 years ago or whatever, right? Business processing. I mean, at the end of the day, it was a lot more manual than what it is today, right? I mean, I just came back from a conference, and I'll just share like some of the things that we're starting to see. It's like how AI and AI agents are actually going to start to actually improve stuff, right? And actually, I would say, I mean, at the end of the day, yes, it might feel that they're going to take away some of the user, but at the end of the day, the user's still got to be up on the higher level. So maybe I'm not going down exactly your question, but at the end of the day, I think the key is at the end of the day, it's evolving rapidly all the time, but it was very, very manual back then.
Yeah, so when you think about from a segment perspective, in at that time, predominantly partnership meant channel and fulfillment. There were very few business process automation and consulting company out there in
Right.
SMB and mid market. They were all in enterprise, right? So when you think
Correct.
about at that time, were you an engineer developer at that time, or are you already in marketing at that time?
I would say I probably was already starting to get into more of the marketing. I mean, I was working on marketing before I went out and set up a couple agencies. My developer days was actually what I trained as. I decided that wasn't the direction I wanted to get into. Once I really got out there in the working ecosystem, I started going down actually more into consulting and help desk. That's where I sort of enjoyed it. So probably at the end of the day, I was touching it. I mean, at the end of the day but I spent more time really from not necessarily processing, but what we did as a company back then. So that was really where my focus was. But then again, saying about that, the first product I was working with was actually an integration into Jetty Edwards, the World and One World products. Basically, it was a form solution. So basically taking, I mean, again, it's still business processes, but basically taking the data, the raw data out and converting that into nice looking documents. At the same time, putting in an opportunity to actually not only print it, but also take it, fax it, email it. Wow, that's just thinking about, as I just said the word fax, how many people use faxes today, right? So, I mean, those are the things we're doing. And I mean, if you evolve all the way through, we look now, and at the end of the day, most of the solutions out there are doing that as part of their base product.
And where most of them were in enterprise, or they were in any other segments?
So I worked heavily, as I said, in the Jetty Edwards space, which was World and One World, which would have been more enterprise than SMB. Later on, I joined another outfit that was in the EDI space, but I was actually running their channel. But again, we crossed across from the enterprise all the way down to SMB. It really depending on the particular type of company it was, not necessary if it was enterprise or SMB.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about sort of, I've been living in the Bay Area for almost 3 decades now, and when I think about small businesses, especially for personal services, right, whether dropping laundry off or going to a restaurant or any other, getting my hair cut, the level of tools that they use today, automation wise, it's just mind boggling. So,
Right,
and we know 60% of the US workforce are actually in small business.
right,
So
exactly.
20, 30 years ago, they were all in pen and paper and they had a cash register. Today, it seems like a streamlined business process automation. So tell us a little bit about into the evolution that you have seen. Like, how did these process automation technology came down from enterprise to mid-market to SMB over the last decade or two?
I would say, I mean, it's going to be cost, right? As more and more people came into that space, really, that I think that would, I would say, brought the costing down. I think also you have the other side, which is SMB wanting those solutions. And I think at the end of the day, the two were working hand in hand as it pulled down that software and other solutions down into that space. I would also say, I mean, the last couple of years, right, with generative AI, and that's really changing the marketplace because that is becoming affordable to the smaller organizations to actually take on board. Like I said, I was at a conference last week and they were getting into a lot of the AI and agents. Basically, for example, you could be a seller of a widget, and at the end of the day, is that when your stock is low, you have some automated processes in there that actually, and you've set this all up. As soon as you get below a certain level, it will go out and automatically order that from the vendor. It's no longer an individual that's going out there and picking and saying, okay, I need to order another 80 of these widgets, or I need to order 200 because they're going off the shelf like crazy. That could be automated with a process, especially AI agents. And then on the other end of the spectrum, right, you're the manufacturer that receives that. Maybe it's an email or that request to supply these goods. They could be using an agent that actually sucks that back in and actually processes it to the point where it could actually probably send it all the way through. So therefore, it just gets released from the manufacturing company back with very little human intervention. So I would say for me, I would say the last couple of years have been moving like crazy.
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about, that specific use case, right? Because from an efficiency perspective, small businesses for sure, and to some extent medium businesses also very have been traditionally very inefficient because they didn't have the capex infrastructure to invest into automation. Plus the products were not designed for them. Products were
Right.
designed for, it's like Salesforce, as they say, $1 a subscription and $7 to $10 in integration.
Hmm.
No laundromat or kitchen or anybody else is going to spend that level of money. So what do you see from a deployment for these agents and these applications in SMB or lower end of the mid market? Where is that today? How does the subscription plus services dollar play out? Because if I'm a partner providing services into that segment, I can't just live off commissions of selling a $20 or $200 software, right? So how does
Right.
the economics look like into that segment?
My first is to answer where are we, right? I mean, I think we're still on the early stages of that. I think at the end of the day, we're not totally baked out on that, but I think it's coming. It's based on everything that we see around AI. It's moving. I mean, I remember seeing a picture last week, it's a slide, and it showed like the evolution of like Facebook and how long that took before that hit the market compared to where we are with AI. And it sort of feels like, I don't know, if I put it in my terms, right? Facebook took 3 years before it became everyone was using it. AI, it's like within a week and we're already moved on to something else, right? So it's rapidly moving. So I think we're still on the early part of it, but it's coming. how do we make money? I think there's two sides of it. I think one is probably for a system integrator is to actually make money by building the AI agent, but then somehow turning that into a repeatable consumption model, right? So I know that Microsoft, we're talking about, it's at the end of the day, if you wanted to use one of their agents, at the end of the day, you may be able to get away with, say, if you're only doing 10 orders, hypothetically, right, 10 orders a month, maybe that goes through as a free. But as soon as you go outside of that, you have to pay for each order that you process through it, if that's incoming or outgoing, right? So I think it's going to be that recurring revenue. That's really where it's going to have to be, where the income's going to have to come in.
That's pretty cool. So from a system integration perspective or service provider perspective, right? You work with a lot of Microsoft partners. So do you see excitement in that segment that they're trying to move up market in enterprise, or they're more focused in, mid market or SMB? Because enterprise is, we have a lot of enterprise customers. The biggest thing I hear about AI is governance and data security and data control. We don't have those level of concern in smaller organization as long as they see the
Right.
efficiency. So where do you see the partners are focusing on revenue generation and application perspective?
I think at the end of the day, the majority of the partners we work with are in the SMB space. I don't really see them necessarily going more up market just because of there is a lot of opportunity in that space alone. Yes, at the end of the day is so the solution we deal with in the ERP space a lot is Business Central. But at the end of the day, I mean that could easily be a small organization. I mean, Marketeery is not a massive organization, right? We could easily use Business Central, and that sort of makes me think, hey, why are we not using it? But we could be using it internally, right, with a small team. But at the same time, you could have hundreds of users on there using it. So it can grow up and down. So I think at the end of the day, our partners are mainly SMB. I think Microsoft tried to play with an SMC, right, which was like the between SMB and enterprise. At the end of the day, I mean, Business Central could go all the way up, and I think it really depends on the industry that partner's in. From excitement, I think at the end of the day is I see a lot of excitement from the partner community about what's here and what's coming. At the same time, I see people look at it and say, is it really baked yet? Right? Can we really put this process into play today? Or is it more, I hate to use the word smoke and mirrors, but is it more smoke and mirrors at the moment? And it is what's coming, but we're just not ready to deal with it now. I know a few of the partners that we work with, they're already running scenarios in their head around how they can use agents to actually improve business processes. And then on the flip side, I mean, I talked about AI in agents. I mean, there's a few partners I know very well that again, in the Microsoft space, they're using tools like the Power Apps, like Power Automate, Power Flow, and all that to actually automate processes that maybe in the past you may have had to buy an ISV to do that. And then you've got additional licensing, whereas this process could be written once, paid for once, and then it's used over and over again. Or they bring someone out in house to do this.
So from a structure perspective, segment perspective, what is the definition of SMB? I know from a size wise, less than 100 employees, or maybe up to even 250 in some cases. But if it's small business wise, where do you see the traction is from a business process application wise? Is it 10 employees and above? Is it 50 to 100? Where are most of the partners focused on from an economic perspective?
I would say it varies there. I really would say it varies, and I would take S&B up higher. I mean, there's one partner we work with that's been basically was working on basically an ERP failure account, and that was, I think, if I remember rightly, it was like nearly 500 users, but still classing it as SMB, right? So at the end of the day, I think it really depends on what they're doing. So if you think about right? So let's say you're receiving a lot of orders via maybe email, and each of those orders are coming through. They all look different, right? So basically, how do I automate that scanning of those forms without someone have to key that in? Well, there are tools in Azure now that can help you, right? That actually will go, as long as you build up the process, will help you go and scan those forms and actually now automate that process. I remember my days of way back in time actually going on some training with Kofax, trying to work out to scan in an order, and or actually it was more invoicing at that time. And it was challenging because unless you had a template for every single invoice, it wasn't very successful. Even that it was touted that it was high percentage, it wasn't. And the company I worked for at that time, we walked away from not going down that route to try to improve processes because it wasn't successful. But everything I see today and what I've talked to folks who are building out processes to help with that, it's a lot more successful these days.
So, last couple of years, in fact, Goldman Sachs had a podcast on this whole area of vertical SaaS. Their evolution that's happening where companies are going in and saying, okay, we can take horizontal, ERP technology, build custom templates and custom workflow, or we can build end to end all the way from marketing and customer records management and invoice processing, order management, like a fully vertical for just for restaurants, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or just for clinics.
Right.
So do you see, because Microsoft has a very rich ISV space, we're a Microsoft ISV, we're
Right.
vertically focused upmarket in
Yep.
enterprise. So what do you see from a portfolio perspective when these partners are going to these businesses? Because SMB is all verticalized, right? You have clinics, you have hospitals, you have pick a segment, even within a segment, there are micro verticals.
Mm-hmm.
So how are partners going to market with solution wise above and beyond just Microsoft platform technologies?
I would say to go back is that definitely in the SMB, it's becoming more a vertical industry focused. I think historically it wasn't, right? At the end of the day is you could have a partner that was basically you're putting an ERP system in and really it was the fact that they wanted the ERP. It didn't matter what vertical industry they were running. I think it's become more, like you said, it's actually become more important today to be verticalized. I would say the majority of the partners we work with, most of the partners are in the SMB space. They're staying with inside the eco. So at the end of the day, when they don't have maybe the functionality that is needed to be added to the ERP, at the end of the day, they're going to look to the ISV community that's inside the ecosystem. And if that's not there, then they'll look at, can I do it? Do I need to do it as custom code? Do I need to write the integration? Or can I use low code, no code to do it instead? So I think it really, that's where the majority go. They don't tend to go out there and hunt down and say, oh, I saw there was some software over in somewhere else. I would say majority of the time they stay within inside the ecosystem, majority of it, and look for solutions there.
So that's quite amazing. I haven't heard a lot about the specific point that you're raising. We're talking about all these job losses that are supposed to happen. What I'm hearing from you is the opposite side of the story, because SMB always has, starved of talent, because it's finding talent, retaining them. So now if I'm able to create these virtual agents that can take my little, whatever, 20% restaurant or 10% clinic, get two or three or four of these virtual headcounts that can provide better services, reduce my operating costs, then the profitability on the lower segment will go up substantially.
And that's what I really believe. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people, I mean, again, let's just focus on AI agents, right? I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of people think AI out of the gate it's gonna kill jobs. I think at the end of the day, it's gonna reposition those people who are, well, I'll use the word, caught in the trap of, hey, I have to take this invoice or this, and I have to process it manually. It's taking down those repetitive things that really don't need a human and pulling them to something that actually can help grow the business. I mean, I think back to, I go back to the years ago. It's like I grew up in England and I lived for a period of time in Wales, which at that time back then, or even before I lived there, was primarily very heavily coal mining, right? And the end of the day is when they closed the coal mines down, what happened? Well, they retooled those people at that time all around call centers. This was before call centers became big out in India, right? So at the end of the day, countries did their own call centers. And then, of course, other places like India, Philippines, and all that started to do that a lot cheaper. So that meant those people had to be retooled again. There's always going to be people who are going to slip through the net. But I think really the bottom line I see is that we are going to get more efficient, but we're also going to find ways to utilize that headcount. Even if I go back and think of another piece of that conversation as well, is going back to the time where the software we were selling could actually reduce accounts receivable, right? That team or accounts payable, right? You could reduce headcount. But we learned very quickly, don't walk into an organization and say, hey, we can reduce your headcount by 50%. It's like, let's talk about how we can reduce that processing time, but then be able to take those people and use them to grow the business.
Yeah, and it hasn't happened into SMB so far, right? Because so
No.
far, what has happened is, enterprise deploys computing technology, whether it's network, computers, processing, and they have had the money to make their processes efficient through system integration and ERP and
Right.
CRM and marketing automation, right? And SMB has been traditionally just get a computer and move your ledger from books to Excel.
Right.
That has been their migration, right? There is no back office, front office automation in a laundromat right now. You
Right.
just yell back,
Yeah.
right? So when there is virtual agents, where I am so excited about the future that you're kind of talking about. So talk to me a little bit. How does a partner, like, how do you help the partner to communicate this to small businesses? Where do you see, from a marketing perspective, the traction is gaining? What is real in that space?
I think my takeaway on that is always the hard one is how can we take use cases and talk it from a use case? Really, it's number one. And I think about my business partner, he uses this word all the time. What is the evidence, right? It's a challenge when you don't have a customer doing it, but soon as you've got customers, you've got evidence and use that evidence to talk, right? So at the end of the day, we use your laundromat, right? As an example, at the end of the day, you own a laundromat. It's let's go through what were your challenges. Let's talk about that. Less about selling what we're selling, but more about how we're solving those problems. What were your issues? And then how we resolve them, making it relatable to the other laundromat that's down the road or the other thousand that's in the city, right? At the end of the day is we've got to talk about that more than talking about ourselves, which is the easy one I think we all drop into. And it's an education that we go through a lot. Also, at the same time, it's how can we help, in some cases, build relationships with others, right? So maybe you're focused in laundromats. I'm focused in maybe another business that has a little bit of an overlap, but we're actually not focused on those two. How can we collaborate as well and send stuff back and forth between the two of us where it's necessary?
So, from a Microsoft partner perspective, the partners that you work with, if you think about today and maybe 12, 18 months out, where do you see the most amount of traction in SMB when it comes to business process automation and AI applications?
I would say, I mean, first of all, it's got to be down to the customers taking it on, right? I think that's the piece we got to get past is that challenge and that worry. But once we get past that, I think at the end of the day, we're going to see more and more business processes. I think we may start small in some cases. Some partners may go in big and try to find areas where there is constant repeatability, right? How can we just take sometimes those small things, but take us forever to do? I mean, I know internally here, it's like, I'm sure probably people could relate to this is, hey, I've got to put a contract together for a new prospect. What do we do? I mean, probably today we may go and find a similar contract, put their name in and just edit some other pieces. Wouldn't it be? I mean, I know we could do this, but we don't do it. But we could put a business process probably in today that basically has a pool of contracts because we're selling the similar things over and over. It asks us some simple questions and then populates that contract. And we could probably close down basically our time it takes to produce one a lot quicker. right? So at the end of the day, I think it's things like that. I think we have to look at also the disparate systems, right? You go back with like SMB, right? There's a lot of disparate systems. Again, I'm going to use your laundromat one because I like that one. It's like, think about if the washing machines and the dryers are using IoT, how could we get a business process that when that machine is down or there's a problem, it notifies us that in turn we take it, maybe it's into our central business solution, and then it tells us what the problem is, or we can then call an engineer to come out. At the same time, it also helps us understand, hey, our projections maybe for this month are going to be a little bit down because this machine is offline, right? So there's a lot of things that can happen over time. And I think at the end of the day, it's just, I think I would be looking at, we just got to get our brains together and find how can we solve some of these processes through technology.
You're going to laugh at this. The reason I brought up laundromat, because as I travel for business, if I'm away for more than a week or two, I hate carrying luggage, right? So
Right,
I pack the smallest amount of luggage, but I also hate paying $55 to get a shirt pressed at the hotel, right? So what I
right,
typically do, whether through Europe or, Asia, when I travel through, I try to look up laundromat within the hotel and I go drop off the whole pack. And overnight, I pay $50. My entire bag is laundered, right?
right, right,
And what I've seen consistently around the world, that is the most low tech place you could be. They're resource staff. There's some grumpy person sitting over there at
yep,
the counter. You don't have the coins. A lot of the places do take credit card. But when you think about the automation opportunity at the lowest form of services, which is relatively high value add services because you want to show up clean next day to a client place,
right,
right? So so the level of automation, and then you start moving up the change, clinics and hospitals and lawyers and loan processing. All of those things are run by small businesses, 10, 20, 30, 40 person companies that provide 60% of the employment in the US and
right.
also in Europe, maybe even more. So talk to me a little bit about the partner from a marketing perspective. What has changed? What is changing right now from a go to market wise? How do partners market?
I think it's changed a lot. I think if we talk of, again, like you said, we're ERP and CRM, and I'm just going to focus on ERP at the moment, so I don't have to say too many acronyms. But for many, many years, ERP opportunities were either driven by word of mouth, or historically, we faxed something, or the business just came. It just seemed to be that people won. That's changed a lot, right? The buyer now is so much more educated to the point where they know probably 70%, they probably already are 70% through the buying cycle today compared to where they used to be. They needed us to actually train them why they needed what we had. So if you think of that, they're 70%. And that's only going to increase with AI search, right? There is projections that that's going to change it to at least 80%. So how do you get in front of people, right? So you've got traditional mechanics, which is going to a conference, right? Where is your audience? So again, we'll use laundromat. Is there a conference focused for laundromat owners? Be there. If that's where you have technology, you have to be there. You go to another end of the spectrum and say, okay, I'm after winery organizations. Where's that audience? We have to look at where they are, and then what technology are they using? What platforms are they using to consume information? Right? Are they using LinkedIn? Are they using Twitter? Are they using Instagram? Those are just a couple, right? And we have to continue educating. It's not about, again, less about us, more about the problem solving. But if you want to start, and I was doing a session on this last week about AI search, that's going to turn everything upside down. It's like SEO part 301. It's the SEO, it's evolving. You still got to do SEO, but SEO that also helps you start ranking and being a source in AI search, right? If someone's typing in, they're going to ask questions and you need to find a way. So I think at the end of the day is it's education. It's also reviews. Basically, there's tools out there, and you probably like G2 and sites like that, right? You need to be on those sites and you need to have good reviews because all of that's being taken in. even in traditional search, that's still important. But on top of that is customer reviews. No longer going out there and just not putting a customer name, put it on there. I think those are really key. It's down to evidence. And again, constantly talking about how you're solving problems and less about trying to sell the solution you have. So you're constantly educating. I think that would be my sort of approach. It really is trying to draw that person in for wherever they're coming. Another area is, if there is in your industry, is aggregators, right? So in our space, we have a few different aggregators. There's sites like the Partner Index, MS Dynamics World, ERP Software Blog, CRM Software Blog, the Solutions Connections. Those are aggregators. At the end of the day, they actually, if they've got great domain authority, they'll help you better rank. But at the same time, that's even in traditional search, but AI search, that's also what we're seeing. If you're on there, you're another credible source. If anyone who's listening to this doesn't know what those sites are, think of aggregators of content, people like Forbes, Inc., right? Even news sites, right? They're aggregators. And at the end of the day, how do I get my content? How do I go out there and share? I think those, where else could I say? At the end of the day, let's just go back to the laundromats. Let's say there is an org or some organization that there is white papers and all that I could go to that talk about laundromats, right? Go and find a way to be a guest speaker on there. Podcasts, right? Another great place. I mean, we're getting inundated with blogs. I would not stop that, right? And at the end of the day is podcasts. There are less podcasts than there are blogs out there. Podcasts are definitely a way to go forward and actually turning those not into traditional podcasts like we're doing here, right? We're not just talking. We also have a video as well. So therefore put that as well out on the video channels.
So let's talk a little bit about, you talked about evolution of search. Let's talk a little bit also about evolution of social. We ran an event in Austin last week. A couple of months before that, we ran one in Silicon Valley. When I dial back 5 years ago, right before COVID, 60-70% of our registration came from email blasts. Right. This time, 2% of our registration came from email blast and 0% attendance. Mm-hmm. Everything came from social, right? Whether it's paid or direct. So but we are targeting enterprise, right? They're on LinkedIn, they're on certain sites that we know. So what is happening in SMB, other than the technique that you talked about on the search side? What is happening on the social side of things?
I think at the end of the day, it's probably very similar to enterprise. I mean, email is not dead. I think email is very important. Again, it depends on your contact list and what you are trying to promote, right? That is still a valuable tool, and it's probably one of the best. I think even to this day, still doing for these partners is doing webinars, having repeat webinars on your site. So again, you're selling business processes for laundromats, right? At the end of the day, have a repeating webinar every month that when someone comes to your website, they could sign up whichever month they want. If they're not ready today, they could sign up for next month. I think that's key. To social, it's at the end of the day, that to me is still an important place. But I think it's changing from a perspective of a company to now what I like to call as thought leaders, right? Individuals. People are buying more from the people than they are from the organization. If they trust you individually, they're probably going to, that's more the reason they're going to buy. So it's the people, and I don't think they ever change. It's just the mechanics that they're looking more at the people, right? So again, we'll just take LinkedIn. What we like to do is we like to do a lot of thought leadership writing. So within LinkedIn, there's LinkedIn newsletters, which I have to say is not a great acronym or whatever you want to call it, basically that they called it. I think it's more than newsletters. Some people use it as a pure newsletter, but it's a way to communicate. I don't know if you're using them, but at the end of the day is because someone has to subscribe to it, you can build up a subscription list very quickly there based on what you're sharing if you share good content. But you're also picking up people that are in your network and possibly second, thirds, and fourths. connections. And I think that helps. But the one thing I really like about that as well, it's also, if you subscribe, it's emailed to your inbox, right? So when you receive it, you're receiving it from LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is giving, basically, they're using their platform, which has got credibility. At the same time, if you take an email, if I don't want to receive anything from you anymore, what am I going to do? I may just throw you into the spam box. How many times do people actually truly go and unsubscribe? I try to remember to do that myself, but I have a habit throwing it in the bin I don't want anymore. But with the LinkedIn, you can't throw them into spam because that stops everything else you get. So you have to truly unsubscribe. Now, the downside is that I can see who's connected or subscribed, but I can't get the emails. So you could argue and say, well, hang on a minute, I'm on rented ground. So as long as LinkedIn has it, you still have the capability. That's a chance I'm willing to take, is to put content. So I think that really elevates you. And again, we're still on the early days of that for SMB. Come back and ask me that question in a year's time, because I may have a totally different opinion, because maybe in a year's time we'll be saturated there, right? So I think that's just some of it. And basically being active. And again, when I be active, it's not just push content out, also be interactive with other people's conversations as well and show credibility. I know a few people in our industry that are using TikTok very successfully to share little snippet videos, and they're driving business from it. So it all varies.
So let's talk a little bit about sort of, going forward next 12, 24 months kind of horizon. So if you're advising, let's say a 20-person partner that are in business process automation, sales into 25 to 100 employee space, right? And what is the budget that they need to have to not only just do demand gen once, but keep building a rhythm that you're just talking about? What resources, what tactics, how would they work with someone like you so they can get a repeat flow of not just awareness generation, but also top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel engagement?
All right. I'm going to turn that a little bit around. At the end of the day, what we've always tried to do with a lot of the prospects that come into us is really look at where they are in their cycle, how much have they done, what have they not done. At the same time, is what budgets do they really have? Because it's easy to go around and say, hey, I can throw a number and say, hey, you got to have 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, right? But at the end of the day, that's no good me telling you that if I can work out and we all talk in the right way, and I find out really you've only got 50 grand to spend for the year. What can we do in that's going to start to move the needle, but with the understanding it's going to take a little bit of time. Whereas if you spend double that, you're going to speed that process up. Now, even if you have more money, it doesn't mean that you're going to gain things quicker. You still have to set the foundations up, right? So let's go take that back, right? If I remember a client that came to us, we did some work with them, then came back and said, oh, we've just done a paid ad, Google ad campaign. And can you look at it because we didn't convert? We didn't convert anyone. Well, we delved into it, and actually the paid ad itself was really good. The problem was where it was being sent. Their website was trash, right? So at the end of the day, it didn't engage, so we could get a ton of people to the website, but that foundation wasn't where it needed to be. So at the end of the day, without being rude, they wasted a whole ton of money on a paid ad because their foundations weren't ready. So I would say to really, for budget wise, it could be anywhere from, I would say, from depending on where they really are. And again, do they have people internally as well that can complement things on top? Anywhere from probably 50, 60,000 up to probably 500,000.
That's quite amazing. So I want to come back a little bit on the end user side, right? When you think about like a 25 to 100 employee, they're mostly run by founders and owners,
Right.
and they may be part of a franchise. They may have a corporate umbrella of marketing. But in general, if that's founder led, do you see there is an education gap? Because this is a major shift you just described happening, right? We're going from this search based to AI based. We're going from just social based to this watering hole people go to. I mean, this whole aggregation methods where people go to find out, right, to do something new. How is that changing from an education perspective, educating these owners that own these businesses?
I'll change it around to the partners, because at the end of the day, we have to do exactly the same to those partners, right? Because you're exactly right. Even in the partner ecosystem, you've got a lot of folks who are business owners, and they are not only they're owning, but they're maybe the salesperson, they may be the pre-sales person, they actually may be the person's also implementing as well. When do they have time for marketing, right? And that's also the educating of, hey, I'm busy, but at the same time, tomorrow you may not be busy. How do we get a momentum going so you're getting things, basically opportunities coming up for when that time is that you need another customer? So I think that's definitely a piece that we try to get in. Is one of the things that we look at is, depending on who we're working with, we're either taking over their whole marketing and actually running that for them. Basically, we're becoming like that fractional CMO and execution team. In some organizations, maybe there is more of an administration person that we could work with. We will pass some things to them, right? So that happens a lot. From the other side, from the customer side, where you've got someone that's similar principle, right? They're in the trenches, they're running, literally what I class as in the weeds, right? At the end of the day, is how do we get to them? I think the real key is getting to them and telling that same story, right? What is their challenge? If we talk again business process, are you challenged with 300 invoices coming in each day? Does that bottleneck you because you're staying up late having to key them all in? If the answer is yes, if you can relate to that, or you can turn around and say, hey, we solved this for another client and that increased their business by twofold, aren't you going to get that owner to want to talk to you? So again, it's that evidence play as well, which we play on trying to talk to the partners and the partners to talk to their prospective customers.
So, I've been out of SMB marketing for a bit, but when I was in Philips and even when I was in Sonicol, which later on became part of Dell, SMB was a thriving segment for us. And we used to do a lot of lunch and learns with partners where they would go to local chambers of commerce or local business association. They will have other kind of networking groups. They will have events at the golf clubs.
Yeah.
Are those activities still alive?
I would say so. I think at the end of the day, it's depending on the industry, depending on exactly, there's probably variations, right? I think COVID still hurt. It's still hurting. I think certain things are coming back. There is still a huge benefit in that face to face, right? Like I said, I just came off of a conference last week, which we probably drive historically, we've probably driven over 50 to 70% of our business from it. And this year, the number of conversations we had, if I was to put a number on it and every single one of those conversations turned, we probably would double our company, if not treble, right? So we have more conversations. So again, why? Yes, we set the foundation, but because we were face to face and could have that conversation, there is still that need, I think, in some environments to do that. So yes, I would still go that. But at the same time, I've seen some folks who have tried to go back to trying to set up like a lunch and learn themselves, and it's not working. And I think it goes back to your example, right? At the end of the day, to the events you just hosted, if you stuck to traditional marketing, it probably would have been a failure, right? Because you didn't have anyone really turn up from email. But you turned to social that made the event successful. So it's also that adaptation that maybe the event is not the problem, it's how we get people there is the problem.
Very well said. Well, Jon, I'm super excited to have you at our Tampa event. Thank you for spending the hour with me. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I didn't even actually realize coming into it the level of change that's happening in SMB related to AI because, us living in the enterprise space, reading the Kool-Aid about everything that's going on with AI in enterprise, but seems like there's a huge opportunity in SMB and SMB marketing. So look forward to having a great conversation with you. So thank
I
you.
look forward to it. No, thank you for inviting me to this podcast. And again, I look forward to meeting you face to face and having a deeper conversation at the next event.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.